Hey everybody, welcome to the show. Around the Nation right here, TOT Nation. Jeff Waldorf here with you on this Tuesday afternoon. So we got a big day. We are going to talk about the Trump-Putin summit a little bit. At least we're going to talk about the reaction because I'm pretty sure all of you are already aware of all the stuff that happened and all the stuff that's said. So what we're going to do is we're going to talk about some interesting reactions to this summit, specifically from right-wingers. Now, we already know a lot of what the left is thinking about. I mean, for fuck's sake, you had treason summit basically trending on Twitter. So, oh, hey, look at that. So we're pretty sure we know where the Democrats stand, but I want to show you where Republicans stand because I think that's really, really interesting. But we're not just going to talk about the Putin summit all day. Actually, that's 2 segments. Not 2 seconds, sorry, 2 segments. And then we're going to move on to some other stuff. For example, we've got victims of the Las Vegas massacre. They're being sued. Well, that's an interesting turn of events. So I want to talk about that. We also have a Republican on the right side of policy. Holy crap. I'm going to go into that, what that is. We also have child labor laws. We're going to look a little bit at that in Republican efforts to be on the wrong side. So, of course, I give some and then I take some away as far as credit goes. Then we have MAGA hats in China. And then finally, good news coming out of California, the California Democratic Party. Feinstein. Is she done? Interesting. We'll talk about that. Okay. Anyway, so fun stuff here. So if you guys haven't already, please give us a share. That's the rundown of the show. So hopefully you guys stick around for the rest of the show, for the rest of the hour. We are going to give you a full hour, even though we do start a bit late. So, you know, we're going to do the best that we can. Okay. So, also, please consider using the Super Chat. If you have, like, a comment or a suggestion or whatever, you just want to give, to say something and have me read it on the air, you know, Jeff will read anything you put in the prompter. So, that's what we're going to do. Please consider using that because that, of course, that helps the show. But aside from that, liking, sharing, all that stuff helps us greatly. Okay. And I know right now I'm competing against aggressive progressives, so this is about to probably the toughest day of the toughest time slot ever. So I appreciate everybody here who is here and who's decided to stay with me. Okay, anyway, so let's move on. We got the first story here. We're going to talk about Fox News and their reaction to President Trump and the Trump-Putin summit. This is great. Okay. Now, after the Donald Trump Vladimir Putin summit press conference, which was very, very strange. So, and a lot of different pundits have come out and explained why it was pretty strange. The deference that he gave to Vladimir Putin. I'm not really going to talk about all that. But that is a subject of discussion among Fox News hosts. Now, apparently, some of them have come out guns blazing at President Trump's apparent worship of this autocratic leader. Now, this is fascinating because Fox News, as you know, is a propaganda arm of the Republican Party. So, look, in I think most circumstances, they defend Trump completely. Even when he lies about things and then comes back and then does a backpedal on the lie, or the lie that he was lying about originally that he lied about. It's hard to keep that straight. But anyway, so now on the idea that the U.S. is to blame, because that's what he said. Oh, Russian aggression. Well, that's the United States' fault. Wait, how's it the United States' fault when Russia decides, let's go and take Crimea? Well, I don't know. It doesn't seem like it's our fault. Not only that, but also on the idea that all of his own intelligence guys on, Russian hacking into the DNC, DCCC, and Clinton's emails are wrong. To that, Fox News said, all right, that's it. That's it. We've had enough. Let's start out with Fox Business host Trish Regan. I don't know if it's Regan or Reagan, which it would make sense if it was Reagan, because it is Fox News after all, but here's what she had to say about this entire thing. Watch.
The mainstream media did not want this meeting to happen, and I had really hoped I could say that they were wrong. I thought that maybe I could, at this moment in time, say they were wrong, because this was an opportunity for our president to get up there on stage and look Vladimir Putin in the eye and say, you're not going to mess with us again. But he didn't. In fact, he basically said he didn't buy what his own intelligence community was telling him. This was clearly not his best performance. He's done a whole lot better than this. He should have defended us. He should have defended his own intelligence community. Or just don't take the meeting. Don't go to Helsinki if you can't look the guy in the eye and tell him what's what.
Damn. Again, I forgot for a moment that I was watching Fox Business, which, by the way, when do they ever actually talk about business? I don't think I've ever seen that. We'll get back to Fox Business. There's also a different host on there that is very friendly towards Donald Trump. We'll get to her, of course. But look, what Trump said is that, hey, man, look, Putin, I asked Putin if he meddled in the election, and he said no. He strongly denied it. So, look, anybody who knows Putin knows that he's a former KGB officer, and he's an autocratic ruler. There's no actual real democracy. Even Edward Snowden, who was given the ability to live in Russia, says, you realize that the elections here are rigged. Well, you want to talk about rigging, right? What Putin does makes the DNC, which the DNC, what they did was terrible, right? They make what the DNC did look like child's play. You want to know how to rig elections? Putin will tell you how to rig elections. But anyway, now, let's move on further, right? So he chose Putin, whose only interest is increasing Russian power over his own intelligence agencies. It's not ours. right? The members of these agencies ain't nobody's liberals. See, that's why I've got issues with them and their trustworthiness. I don't trust our intelligence agencies either. But you have to look at what they're saying. Not everything that they say is a complete lie. You actually have to look at the reasoning behind what they're saying. Now, for example, in Iraq, a lot of people like to point out Mueller helped sell us on the Iraq war. Well, you got to look what the Iraq war was about. It was about oil. So, okay, James Clapper on when it came to the spying on Americans. That was trying to protect the Obama administration and that policy so that they wouldn't be embarrassed. So okay. So what would be the payoff to this? What would be the whole point of making up Russian attempts, not actual infiltration, but attempts to infiltrate our voter databases? I mean, I could make the argument that, well, look, if we have this infiltration, maybe we should get rid of the D-Bowl voting machines. Oh, wait, no, those are connected to highly placed Republican, leaning businessmen. They make money off selling those voter machines, so that doesn't help the Republicans. So I'm just trying to figure out what the payoff here is, right? But look, it's not like the intelligence agencies haven't lied to us, right? But why lie about this? That's what I'm wondering. Why lie? I mean, look, it's not like they're Hillary Clinton or DNC plans. These are all Republicans, right? Mueller's a Republican. Rosenstein's a Republican. Comey was a Republican. Now he's an independent. So why would they make things up about a Republican president? I guess I could see why Comey, because Comey got fired. But as far as the other ones, I just don't quite understand it. And on Comey, look, he knew there was an investigation into Trump Russia during the election. This is why while he was still serving as head of the FBI. You know what he did? He chose not to reveal that information. Why did he choose not to reveal information that President Trump was under investigation during the election? Oh, right. It's because it would hurt his chances. Now, did he give that same consideration to Hillary Clinton? No, he did not. We know that because he came out days before the election and said, oh, hey, you know what? Looks like Hillary's under investigation for that damn email server. Nothing we can do. Nothing we can do. We're looking into it, though. Do you think that maybe hurt her election chances? Perhaps. You could definitely argue that it hurt her campaign. And look, for me, I think that Hillary Clinton's campaign died the death of 1,000 cuts. I've explained that before. But here's the point, is that they're not trying to push the DNC narrative that Hillary Clinton actually won the election, and if it weren't for those dastardly Russians, that she would have won. No, they're not saying that. Not one of these reports alleges that any votes were changed whatsoever. Not one single vote. And they keep stressing that and stressing that. So again, where's the payoff here? What point would there be to lie about this? I don't see a point. Now the emails, of course, that were released, again, actually did help Republicans win. Why? It's because they were damning against Clinton. So here's what they're doing, is that they're actually just following what evidence that they can find. And that evidence that they have concluded that the Russians most likely hacked the DNC, stole the emails, and attempted to breach voter databases. And so we have a president now that's like, nope, sad, witch hunt, fake news. I believe Russia over my own people. And look, he's Putin's bitch. And that's why he's refusing to fight back. Now, I'm not saying punch him in the face or launch nukes. I'm not interested in war. And that's another narrative here, right? Look, I'm not interested in war. Some people are interested in the war. I'm not. Those people are idiots and they're wrong. And war with Russia would be absolutely disastrous. I'm not going to go in that direction. I don't want to go in that direction. And I'm going to be very, very clear about that. But anyway, tangent aside, Fox hosts aren't done yet. In fact, you have Neil Cavuto, who said, quote, I just found that Vladimir Putin appeared to run circles around the president and got him to buy hook, line, and sinker every single sneaky lie and misstatement he has made on this matter. Not just them. Newt Gingrich, right? Newt Gingrich is somebody who sucks on the president's ass more than anybody. He said, quote, President Trump must clarify his statements in Helsinki on our intelligence system and Putin. It is the most serious mistake of his presidency and must be corrected immediately. So Cavuto, Reagan, Gingrich, already. No, it's not. It gets worse. Here's more. Maria Bartiromo, right? This is one of Donald Trump's biggest defenders. Said this and had this discussion on Fox Business. Let's take a look at that.
I don't think there's any question that the Russians tried to undermine the West, have been trying to undermine the West for decades and meddled in our election. I've got the report right here. Report on Russian active measures from the Intel Department. This is from Devin Nunes and the Intel, Intel Committee, rather, which released it in March. So there's no question about that, but the president did not want to address it in front of Vladimir Putin, which is a head-scratcher.
Right. It's, as you point out, these are not partisan findings. No. These are bipartisan findings.
And this has nothing to do with collusion. This is not about Donald Trump.
Right.
This is about the Russians undermining the U.S. Not about Donald Trump.
What's also head-scratching is he had spent the previous days sticking his finger in the eye of so many allies in Europe. You know, Theresa May in London and
Angela
Merkel in Germany. And, you know, how do
he said Germany is totally controlled by Russia. He said that during the...
Well, he also called their European allies foes. And then when asked if Russia was a foe, he said they're a competitor. It's just...
Yeah, and I think it's just going to be, going forward, what does this do in our position in foreign policy around the globe, too?
Another question, who quits in this administration? If anybody, but who quits? That's certainly being discussed.
There are questions that we could see resignations.
Right.
We'll see about that. We'll see how long-lasting this is. It was probably the low point of the presidency.
It's a low point of the presidency. Boy, this whole idea, man, the president didn't want to address this in front of Vladimir Putin. It's a real head-scratcher. No, it's not a head-scratcher. I think we know why. I'm pretty sure we know why. For some reason, he has this huge deference towards Vladimir Putin. And again, you can speculate on the exact reason why. But I think it's pretty clear from his behavior, there's something going on there. Now, it's not just Maria Bartiromo. You also have Fox News' John Roberts. Now, John Roberts is talking about the reaction that he's getting, and this is interesting. Take a look at this.
Indications are that this is going to cost the president dearly politically. The summit that he just completed in Helsinki and is flying back home from now, he is taking it on the chin, not just from Democrats, but from Republicans as well, from literally every state across the nation. Now, I think diplomatically, you could probably say that the president's strategy was he wanted to engage Putin. He didn't want to say anything that was going to tick him off. But there's a growing consensus across the land tonight, Shep, that the president threw the United States under the bus.
The president threw the United States under the bus. That is not coming from MSNBC. That is not coming from CNN. All these different critiques, they're coming from Fox News. And look, Maria Bartiromo, just to go back for that one just a minute. This whole thing is separate from the collusion issue. And they make sure, like, it's not, they're not about collusion. Nothing about collusion. It's all about if the Russians went and tried to interfere in our election. And the overwhelming answer is absolutely yes. So why, and this might be tied to the collusion, why is President Trump not actually challenging them? So even when they're making sure to point out, oh, we don't believe in the collusion angle, Trump's reaction, they can't help but kind of notice that Trump's reaction could be possible evidence of collusion. Now, again, not solid evidence, nothing like that. But you just look at that and you're like, I wonder why. And it puts that question into everybody's head. Is there collusion? I don't know. But somebody seems to be acting like there might be. But look, when a Republican president gets that much pushback from Fox News, you know that there is something definitely wrong here. When Fox News feels the need to go and say, oh, hey, man, look, there's something going on here. Like, you might want to go back and you might want to be a little tougher and say, hey, don't fuck with us. Don't mess with our elections. What you did was wrong. I mean, that's exactly the advice that they're trying to give Trump. Hey, be strong. And it was important, too, what one of those guests with Bartiromo was actually saying is, while this is going on, he's sticking his finger in the eye of all of our different allies and embracing somebody who is, I wouldn't say an enemy of the United States, but definitely not a friend, right? An adversary, even. So that's weird. And look, I think personally, if you ask me, Trump did everything but give Putin a handy during that during that whole thing, and it just kind of makes you wonder, and it makes me wonder in my head, what the hell does Putin have on Donald Trump? I don't know, man. And if there is something, it's got to be good. Okay. Or bad. Moving on here. More reaction. Okay. So following what has been called an incredibly bizarre press conference between Donald Trump and Vladimir Putin, where, look, the president went against his own intelligence agencies and basically threw America under the bus. Now, Fox and Friends had to come in, and look, we know President Trump watches Fox and Friends, that he values the opinion of Brian Kilmeade, which is bizarre in itself. But Fox and Friends made sure to lecture the president on what he should have actually done. Let's watch.
The president's under the impression, and I don't know why still, that if he says the Russians hacked, it makes his election look illegitimate. I have news for you. Senator Schumer and Hillary Clinton will never get over the fact that you won the election. Neither will 16 Republicans get over the fact that you won the primary. Did the Russians help you with that? No. It wasn't because of Russia, but Russia's goal was to upend our electoral process. Right. They hate democracy. And I will say this to the president, when Newt Gingrich, when General Jack Keane, when Matt Schlapp say the president fell short and made our intelligence apparatus look bad, I think it's time to pay attention. And it's easily correctable from the president's perspective. Sure. Nobody's perfect, especially in 10 intense days of summits, private meetings, and everything on his plate. But that moment is the one that's going to stand out unless he comes out and corrects it.
Well, look, there's a a lot of people get confused. I'm not saying the president's confused, but a lot of people are confused about the Russia collusion thing. There is a big difference between collusion and the meddling. The president says there was no collusion. I mean, he's strident in that. He says it every time. But pretty much everybody and their brother, except Vladimir Putin, knows that there was meddling. So, Brian, to your point, where it drives the president crazy, apparently, when it is suggested that he did not win the presidency on his own, that there was some meddling that helped him. Keep in mind, all the authorities have said that there was meddling, but not a single vote was changed.
By the way,
so that's really important. Okay. So again, here's Fox News saying, but you know, there was meddling, but it didn't help. I mean, you still won. You still won. Handily. But people are getting so confused between the issue of meddling and collusion. Well, you know, one thing could lead to the other, but also one thing could happen without the other. So, to be fair, so here's Fox News saying, look, believe your intelligence agencies. Don't give Russia more power, but also, hey, this isn't an attack on your ego. This is an attack on your win. But it's actually an attack on our country. So I love this because, again, these guys are the Trump whisperers, right? They know he's watching. And it shows you how even his most strident defenders, except for Hannity, of course, because Hannity is beyond saving, shouldn't even try. They're all kind of rattled at what was basically Trump giving deference to a foreign leader whose country's whose country, had attempted to disrupt our elections through, again, social media. That was a small part of it as well. And then, of course, through attempting to penetrate our voter databases. They didn't get through. Doesn't mean they're not going to try again, which is why, of course, we should get verifiable hand-counted paper ballots. That would be my solution to the issue. But look, here you have, the people at Fox and Friends just tiptoeing around that, like, be careful, be careful, be careful. You still won. Hillary still lost. But this also happened, and it's not the same thing. I mean, it's fascinating to see what's happening in this. But look, here's the thing, right? I told you that they penetrated they possibly penetrated the voter databases, right? Or they attempted to. So they didn't change any votes. That's true. Now, Hillary Clinton, by the way, she lost an election that is completely winnable. So her campaign, as I kept saying before, died a death of 1,000 cuts. It wasn't just the emails. It wasn't just her terrible campaign. It wasn't Gary Johnson or Jill Stein. It wasn't the Bernie or Busters. It wasn't just not campaigning in Michigan and Wisconsin. It wasn't just a lack of enthusiasm. It was actually all those things combined, and it was a perfect storm. Each little thing contributed, right? And it was also the fact that Trump ran as a supposed outsider, and the fact that he got $2 billion worth of free media. Not to mention the Pied Piper strategy that was launched from the Clinton campaign to elevate him. That also helped him, as did the fact that America is in a populist mood, all while she was running to the center. There you go. and here you have, and this is funny as well, aside from just Fox News now saying, yes, there is hacking, there was meddling, and it happened. Now you have the I'm with her crowd, right? That cites these intelligence reports that the emails are hacked, because they were. But you see them ignoring the content of those emails. Now, why that's important is because the content is what actually helped lead to her loss. Partly. And on the other side, you do have some people that ignore the emails, though incredibly relevant and informative. They ignore the fact that the emails were stolen by operatives of another country that is not our ally. So both things can be absolutely true. And so just like what Fox News is doing here, they're in the position of threading the needle for Trump. So, and that's what's going on. I mean, yes, Donald Trump, you still won, but the Russians did also attack our election. It is very interesting. Both things are actually true. And the thing about this is that here we have Fox News, of all places, attempting to do some sort of nuance, which no longer really exists, I think, on either side of this Russia issue. I mean, look, I think the nuance does need to be pointed out so we can have an honest discussion about what happened about this issue. And I think the reason that's important, I know there's a lot of people out there that'll say things like, yeah, but, people that are working 2 or 3 jobs to survive, they don't care about Russia. That's fair to point that out. And certainly, okay, yeah, I agree with that. But at the same time, we need to have a discussion about making sure our elections are verifiable, right? So what we need to do is we need to protect our electoral system from unwanted intrusion, whether it be from foreign countries, Saudi Arabia or Israel or, Russia, or even the Republican Party or even the Democratic Party trying to rig their own primaries. What we need to do is we need to protect our elections to make sure that it doesn't happen. Because even if it doesn't happen in the primary or the 2020 election, at some point it will. So the thing that we need to do is to head it off before it does. That's why it's important to have this discussion on Russia. And very important to have an actual nuanced, real discussion on it, and not one filled with talking points from one side or the other side, but actually a discussion on the truth. Okay. So that's it with that. I think I'm fairly clear. All right. Moving on. So last October, Stephen Paddock opened fire from the 32nd floor of the Mandalay Bay Hotel into a crowd, killing 58 people and leaving more than 850 people injured. Now, that hotel, fast forward, owned by MGM Resorts International, is now launching a lawsuit based on that day. Unfortunately, the target of the lawsuit is the victims. Now, that's insanity. And of course, I can understand people reading this headline and not getting any further and going, the boycott, MGM doing terrible things. And I actually do agree, but there's a lot of context here. So what we're going to do is we're going to break it down. Now, the company, which owns Mandalay Bay and the Route 91 Harvest Festival venue, which is where the shooting happened, argued that its security vendor had taken all the necessary precautions approved by the Department of Homeland Security for protecting against and responding to acts of mass injury and destruction, and therefore they are suing preemptively to make sure that they are not held liable based on their security. They're saying, hey man, look, our security was good. It's not our fault that there was a gunman that came in, that we didn't catch them. Our security was good, which means we were prepared for terrorist attacks. So it's not our fault. Sorry. Now, I've got to be clear, because it's not always clear in the reaction to this, that the company is actually not seeking monetary damages. All it's doing is saying, we are not liable, so do not hold us liable. Now, again, I will disagree with that, but that is their stated position. Now, the question is, of course, can they actually do that? Can they sue preemptively to say that we are not liable to prevent any sort of lawsuits in the future? Well, the company cites a 2002 federal act that extends liability protection to any company that uses anti-terrorism technology or services that can help prevent and respond to mass violence. Now, Rachel Crosby, writing for the Las Vegas Review-Journal, explains, the company argues the security vendor MGM hired for Route 91, Contemporary Services Corps, is protected from liability because its services had been certified by the Department of Homeland Security for protecting against and responding to acts of mass injury and destruction. Well, that would be apparently what happened here. Now, the lawsuit argued that this protection also extends to MGM, since MGM hired the security company. So what they're doing is basically they're asking a judge to decide whether or not that 2002 law is applicable to this situation. And if so, to determine that future civil lawsuits are not viable against the company based on this. And so what they did is that this decision was based on people that were apparently launching lawsuits for 9/11. So, okay, so this is a bit problematic here. But first, before I get to that, let me get to a quote here from a spokeswoman from MGM Resorts. Now, she said, "The federal court is an appropriate venue for these cases and provides those affected with the opportunity for a timely resolution. Years of drawn-out litigation and hearings are not in the best interest of victims, the community, and those still healing." Well, now wait a minute here. They're the ones that are doing a preemptive lawsuit against the victims. What are they doing? Saying, well, I mean, going into a court, it's not in the best interest of the victims. No. What it is, it's in the best interest of yourself. It's in the best interest of your company, because then if you are found liable, if your security is found lacking, which I do believe it is, then you would be liable for some of the damages. Now, you look at the families that have been affected by this, they have suffered massive injuries. The people who survived, massive injuries. Not only that, but the people who were killed also had their own expenses, from medical expenses to funeral arrangements. That shit does not come cheap. So here's the hotel saying, but that's not our fault. we did everything that we were supposed to do, so now that's on you. Let me just say for a minute that it's sort of barbaric what we do in this country, because if we have a mass shooter, like in the situation in Las Vegas, well, you know, the survivors often end up with tens of thousands, even hundreds of thousands of dollars in medical debt for something that wasn't their fault. And I think that's why, related to lawsuits, of course, I think that's why some people sue, because, man, I can't afford this. I got $300,000 in medical bills. How am I supposed to pay this? What am I supposed to do? I don't know. Maybe I guess I'll just I'll see if I can sue for liability damages. And that, to me, that would actually make a lot of sense. And sometimes they do end up winning those suits. Oftentimes, maybe they don't. I don't really know the numbers on it. But anyway, there's the spokeswoman from MGM. Now I have an attorney who represents some of the victims. This is Robert Aglet, telling the review, quote, "I've never seen a more outrageous thing, where they sue the victims in an effort to find a judge they like." Now, what does he mean by that? Well, by initiating a lawsuit and using the 2002 federal law, they're hoping to go to federal court as opposed to a Las Vegas court. Now, why would they want to do that? Well, it's because they could actually get a more favorable judge. So that would be, of course, as he mentioned, judge shopping. Like, yeah, we want to get a judge that's more favorable to prevent any sort of liability lawsuits against us. We want to stop that because we want to save our bottom line. So that's what they're doing here. Now, here's an interesting thing. Again, they're using an anti-terrorist statute, right? Well, Paddock is not actually considered by the federal government to be a terrorist. Now, they say, of course, that's a lack of motive, so that's something they might have to consider in this lawsuit, right? That might hurt them in the end. And I'm going to tell you actually what's going to hurt them far more. But then again, in that same statute, they say that the Homeland Security, the services of that security firm have been basically vetted by Homeland Security and certified for protecting against and responding to acts of mass injury and destruction, which, of course, this would end up being. So I don't know how exactly it's going to play out in actual court, but in the court of public opinion, well, already they're being savaged. I mean, the whole idea, the whole optics of suing the victims, even if you're trying to prevent like liability claims, even and you might even have a case like, hey, it's not our fault, we did what we were supposed to do. Well, that still looks fucking terrible. I would not have gone in that direction if I were the company, especially because there weren't any lawsuits that were gearing up, as far as I know. Again, this was preemptive. This was saying, we're going to make sure that you can't sue me in the future. Look, I don't know. That looks terrible. Personally, I think whoever spearheaded this boneheaded maneuver should probably get fired. Because that inevitable blowback, again, it's already happening. It's already a PR disaster. And so, look, as far as the company's concerned, whatever happens in court, I think the damage is already done. When you preemptively sue the victims of a mass shooting, you automatically make yourself the bad guy, whether you're right or not. So, okay, anyway, that's that on that. All right, here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a quick break. We'll come back. We've got a rare Republican on the right side, deregulation, and much more. So, stay right here. If you haven't already, please share the stream. Leave your super chats if you have any, and we'll come back. We'll read them after we come back on the air. All right. We'll be right back. Round the Nation. Everybody, welcome back to the show. Around the Nation right here, TWT Nation, Jeff Waldorf here with you. We're going to read a couple of super chats that I got earlier. Kimberly Buckley says, I want to know why no one is asking Dolt45 why he has yet to enforce the approved sanctions against Russia. That's actually a great point. Thank you for bringing that up, Kimberly. I mean, look, those sanctions were passed almost unanimously in the Senate and the House. So, oh man, why are you not enforcing those? I mean, but I want to have a good relationship with Russia. I want to have a great relationship with Vladimir Putin. He could be a good friend. Yeah, but it is your job to enforce the sanctions. You are not a dictator. You are not a king. You are unable to break a veto. Again, if you were to veto it, and I think you might have, there is more than enough people in Congress to override your veto. So you are supposed to be putting these sanctions into place. They're supposed to be in place today. But for some reason, he's like, no, can't do the sanctions. Can't do it. I refuse to do the sanctions. And that in itself is hugely problematic. So thank you, Kimberly, for bringing that up. That is an excellent point that I kind of forgot about. Oh, probably because almost nobody's talking about it, which proves your point. Now, Peter S. With the super chat as well says, roses are red, violets are blue, Cohen is flipping, and Dotard is screwed. Oh, that's nice. Thank you, Peter. That is hilarious. If I had shirts, I would give them out. Anyway. Oh, you know what? That is something that I'm actually going to be working on. Side note, getting my logo or whatever put on a shirt. So if you guys might be interested in that, I could make some up and see if anybody's interested in doing that. And of course, that would, of course, go to help the show. So yeah, if you're interested, shirts, hats, let me know, and I will start working on getting that, and maybe give out a few to some patrons too. Okay. Anyway, that said, let's move on. More show. Okay. Now we actually have a Republican on the right side of an issue. This is a Colorado Republican who has now become the first member of the House GOP to support a bill on net neutrality. Well, that's interesting. Now, according to The Hill, who's reporting on this, Representative Mike Kaufman had announced on Tuesday that he would be signing a discharge petition, to bring the Congressional Review Act up for a floor vote. Now, again, Congressional Review Act is a way that Congress can go and challenge a regulatory agency on a recent ruling. For example, Republicans have actually used the Congressional Review Act on a lot of the Obama administration's EPA rulings. So things like not being able to dump coal ash in the river and things like that. These regulations passed by these regulatory agencies, Republicans in Congress were like, well, we don't like that. We actually think you should be able to dump coal ash into the river. And so we're very dissatisfied with this. We're going to do the Congressional Review Act, a measure of disapproval for this regulation. And look, that's a way for Congress to get rid of regulations and actually prevent similar regulations from being put into place. And Republicans have used that constantly during the Trump administration to be able to do that. Now, this Republican, however, is actually wanting to do the Congressional Review Act to do something positive, which is great. Now, he has his own piece of legislation along with signing the Congressional Review Act to codify net neutrality into law. Now, Kaufman's new bill, they explain, is named the 21st Century Internet Act. And what it would do is restore prohibitions on internet service providers blocking, throttling, or prioritizing web content. So, look, a lot of these ISPs are like, we're not going to block because that sounds bad, we'll probably do some stealth throttling. But really, our main thing is we want to do paid prioritization. So what is that? That's, of course, saying, hey, man, look, if you give us a little bit extra on your bill, we can prioritize your internet access to certain websites. That means that you will go faster on these websites. Now, there's, of course, other shady things that they're doing that this bill does not address. For example, I'm probably going to do a really, really terrible explanation of it. But basically, there are points of entry into the internet architecture where ISPs want to charge extra fees for being able to access. Like, you get into my part of the network, we will charge you extra money for you to be able to travel along our lines, which actually isn't their lines. This is public, or at least they were built by the public, these transmission lines that these ISPs are using. Nonetheless, they want to charge companies an extra toll to be able to use that. So that is problematic. And again, I probably butchered that explanation very simply, but nonetheless, even without that stuff, and by the way, the California net neutrality bill does address this. And again, I don't know if Kaufman's bill does, but still, the basics are there. No blocking, no throttling, no paid prioritization. Great. That's some of the major focuses of net neutrality, treating traffic as if it's all the same. Now, Kaufman in a statement said, while my bill moves through Congress, I'm taking an all-of-the-above approach by simultaneously signing the discharge position on the CRA and introducing my bill. So that's what he's doing, and I think that's actually great. I don't give Republicans a lot of credit very often. But on this issue, the right and left, there's no reason that they can't actually come together and produce good legislation that actually helps people. Now, in this case, there is good reason for him to do so, twofold. Actually, a couple of good reasons. For one, net neutrality is not a partisan issue, right? Like, for example, when you ask the American people how they feel about net neutrality, they overwhelmingly approve. In fact, according to a Mozilla Ipsos poll conducted in February, released in May, 91% of Americans believe consumers should be able to freely and quickly access their preferred content on the internet. That actually grew from last year from the same poll. Now, on more, 78% of Americans believe equal access to the internet is a right. It is a right. That is very, very strong, unequivocal language. All right. And that, of course, is most common among younger Americans. That's 84% of adults under the age of 35. These are future voters, right? So these are future potential voters that say, yes, we believe that equal access to the internet is a right. Everybody should have equal access. Okay. Not only that, 76% of Americans believe internet service providers should treat all consumer data the same and not speed up or slow down specific content. So that, of course, deals with throttling. You have a majority of Americans saying, don't slow down or speed up content. Treat it all equally. Now, what's interesting about that is that a majority of older Americans, 80% of adults aged 55 plus, believe that you should not slow down or speed up specific content. It should all be equal. Those older voters, of course, generally skew Republican. Not only that, but 81% of Americans also share that same opinion. That's 81% of Americans with a college degree share that opinion. So that is a fascinating overlap that you have with older, more conservative voters and also more educated voters. There's more. Now, 63% of Americans, and this is on the self-regulation argument, right? So this is something that you hear a lot from Republicans. Oh, well, look, we don't need net neutrality because these internet companies, I mean, they're not going to do terrible things. They're going to voluntarily look out for consumers' best interests. Are they? Well, I would say no. And I join the majority of Americans in saying the same thing. In fact, 63% of Americans do not think ISPs will voluntarily look out for consumers' best interests. And to that I say, no duh. What they always look out for is their own best interests when it comes to their pocketbook, when it comes to their bottom line. So this poll is very, very encouraging because it was, of course, conducted across ideological lines. Democrats and Republicans, conservatives, and Americans in general, they all agree net neutrality is incredibly important. Now, let's go to the other reason, right? Now, Kaufman himself faces a tough re-election race in a district won by Hillary Clinton in the 2016 presidential race. Remember, he is from Colorado. Now, she won his district by about 5 percentage points. So Hillary Clinton won that. That's a somewhat more liberal district, but it's actually, I think, more of a purple district. So the Cook Political Report rates this race as, quote, a toss-up. So, look, here's a Republican taking the right position, right? Policy-wise. But, of course, it's based on, I think, likely for votes. Now, here's the thing about that, right? Since it is such a bipartisan issue, since it is such a popular issue, and since there is even corporate support on the net neutrality side, remember, you've got Mozilla that's in favor of net neutrality. You had Google, you had Netflix, you have other companies, a lot of small businesses that are like, yes, net neutrality, we rely on net neutrality because if we start getting ransomed by our ISPs, we're going to go out of business. We're not going to be able to afford this. So you've got corporate support on one side, and then you've got the ISPs on the other side. And right now, there is at least one Republican saying, I'm not going to take the side of the ISPs. I'm going to take the side of, yes, Google and Facebook and Netflix, but also the American people who overwhelmingly believe in net neutrality. And if it's hope for one person, well, then there's hope for others, right? And look, maybe, you know, just like with Kaufman, other Republicans in toss-up districts, we might see the same kind of change. Republicans saying, hey, you know what, net neutrality, not so bad after all. Maybe it's not the Obamacare of the internet, which is absolutely ridiculous. But that's Ted Cruz for you. Oh, look, Ted Cruz, also in a competitive race with Beto O'Rourke. Anyway, now, I'm talking about Republicans, right? But there is also another angle to this, and that's, of course, Democrats. Now, look, if you have Republicans that are suddenly going into, hey, I'm a strong believer in net neutrality. In fact, look at me. I signed the CRA. Look at me. I have my own piece of legislation that is in favor of restoring net neutrality. Well, what's that going to do for Democrats? A majority of millennials, younger people, and again, a majority of the American people are very strong on their feelings about net neutrality. So this is not an issue where Democrats are suddenly going to go, no, net neutrality because the Republicans believe in. No, that's going to force Democrats who might be on the fence and who might be funded by big telecom to switch their position and go, oh, okay, hey, look, net neutrality, what are you talking about? I'm a big believer in net neutrality. So either way, I think it's going to be a win-win. It's going to be a win for the American people, and of course, it's going to be a win for a lot of these politicians that are running on that issue as well. So I think I want to give big props to Mike Kaufman for being the first Republican in the House, in office, to be on the right side of this issue. And that is, of course, no matter what, if you're a Republican and you go against some of these big corporations, that is a pretty principled stand to make. So, again, credit to Kaufman, and I hope he is successful, and I hope he sticks to his guns. Okay. All right. I have more. let's go to the Department of Labor. So back in the bad old days, we had this little thing called child labor. Now, this is, of course, before a lot of the labor reforms, labor unions, for example, that put a ban on this horrific practice because, look, you had children that were working in factories that were getting maimed and hurt and sometimes killed in these terrible conditions, right? So you might be asking, what does that have to do with today? What does child labor have to do, you know, back in the olden days, back in the 1800s, what does that have to do with what you're talking about today? Well, the Trump administration and a lot of right-wingers are actually interested in bringing back child labor, at least when it comes to teenage labor. Now, the Department of Labor, this is the Trump Department of Labor, has officially now sent the White House a proposal to allow teenagers to spend full days operating in dangerous occupations. Now, what makes this situation or these occupations dangerous? Well, they were basically involved with things like meat slicers and chainsaws. Now, look, I grew up in a fairly rural area, or at least I went to high school in a fairly rural area. And I had people went to school with that operated chainsaws all the time, right? That did dangerous jobs, that did a lot of farm work, operated tractors and things like that when they're, 15, 16 years old. Nonetheless, I don't think that that should be a fairly standard thing to expect. Now, the Department of Labor disagrees. Now, they say with according to Common Dreams, with the department's plan now before the White House's Regulatory Review Office, a proposal to loosen child labor restrictions, which has been denounced by workers' rights advocates, lawmakers, and former Department of Labor officials, is one procedural hurdle away from public release, reports Ben Penn of Bloomberg Law. Now, the Office of Information and Regulatory Affairs will now review the proposal and send it back to the Department of Labor for edits before it can be published for public comment. Now, the regulation as far, right, so it hasn't been changed, hasn't been edited, it's the initial regulation proposal, would call for relaxing current rules known as hazardous occupation orders, or HOs, that prohibit 16 and 17-year-old apprentices and student learners from receiving extended supervised training in certain dangerous jobs. That includes roofing, as well as operating chainsaws and various other power-driven machines that federal law recognizes as too dangerous for those younger than 18. So that is interesting, right? And I'm actually going to have an interesting thought on this one. So as I mentioned before, I grew up with people who did dangerous farm work. So, even when I was a child, I worked on a dairy farm and operated heavy equipment. Probably what I shouldn't have done, right, when I was younger. So understand that it is definitely possible for somebody who was younger to be able to operate those machines and things like that when they're 16, 17-year-old. But I also understand the other side where they're like, hey, this is fucking dangerous. And maybe we shouldn't do that. So here's the thing. If it were a little bit more, I don't know, broad. For example, this says 16 and 17-year-old apprentices and student learners. Well, okay, look, if they're an apprentice, if they're a student learner, you should be able to get training. Nonetheless, I do think that safety should be in mind. So this is more of a complicated issue. I think there should be, of course, a lot of oversight, a lot of regulation as far as this goes, but maybe not necessarily a ban outright. I'm not entirely sure. I am very, very concerned how this will, impact other kids and whether or not these regulations get loosened even further for people who are younger. And so, of course, that is my main concern here. Now, nonetheless, I'm going to give you some conflicting reports here. I'm sorry, conflicting statements here between people who are in favor of this regulation change and people who are not. For one, you have Keith Ellison. Now, Keith Ellison said that this could jeopardize the safety of America's youth. And I definitely agree with that position because they are dangerous jobs. Now, he said, due to physical and psychosocial factors, young workers have a higher incidence of work-related injuries. Minors do not have fully developed decision-making skills, which can lead to risk-taking on the job. Expanding exemptions for hazardous jobs, especially without adequate oversight, will undoubtedly reverse the progress we have made over the last 2 decades to ensure our young people live safe and healthy lives. So here's the solution to that. Prevent them from actually using those tools. You can still allow them to get training and things like that, but hands-off training. And I think that might be a better way to go. Now, let me give you another one here. This is Reed Mackey, coordinator of the Child Labor Coalition, said that rolling back restrictions barring teenagers from working in certain jobs would be a tragic mistake and would lead to the death of teenage workers. Again, I do believe that there should be regulations preventing teenagers from doing certain jobs. Like, you don't want somebody training to operate in a sewer. Okay. So, again, here's what you have on that. As far as apprenticeships go and training, it should be highly regulated. It should be highly monitored. And people who are younger than 18 should not have the ability to use these machines for safety purposes. That said, I do believe that they should be able to do these. So what they shouldn't be able to do is they shouldn't be able to go and just work those jobs. Now, see, that's a completely different thing, I think, from this regulation. Now, could this lead to more younger people getting involved in these jobs, in these dangerous jobs? Okay. That might be a fair point. It also might be a little bit of slippery slope, so I'm not entirely sure. But if this does lead to that, well, that's hugely problematic for the workforce. Because if you're allowing 16, 17-year-olds to go and operate chainsaws and meat slicers, well, then that destroys job markets for people who are older. And it also puts these people in more danger. So that's a little bit of a problem. But again, if we're just going to stay very, very focused on extended supervised training that is not hands-on, well, then I think that makes a little bit more sense, personally. But again, I have that upbringing, which is more rural, and so I've been there, and I have operated these things, and I have had my own issues, and it can be dangerous, and so I do think people need to be a little bit more careful. But you can't prevent every sort of injury, of course, but you can try to pass rules and think of things that try to prevent people from getting hurt, but also to not prevent them from getting any sort of training through their apprenticeships. And I think that's what's important here is that we keep the ability to be able to do that while making sure that they don't get hurt. So, again, it's a very nuanced position. It's very gray, and it's not quite what we're seeing from arguments from both sides. Again, you have Republicans that are trying to push this in the Trump administration saying it's fantastic. And then, of course, you have people on the opposite side saying this is the same as 12-year-olds being put in the factory, which is not exactly there, but, again, could lead to it. So, all right. Anyway. Move on. Let's move on. Let's go to tariffs. So if you go to a Trump rally, normally one of the things that you'll see is a sea of red hats, Make America Great Again gear. And that red hat is, of course, now iconic. So what's funny is that this red hat is about to get more expensive thanks to Donald Trump. Now, some of these MAGA hats that were made in China may increase in price because of tariffs passed by the Trump administration. Now, a California-based company that sells these hats, similar to the official hats sold by the Trump campaign, say its prices may rise in response to those tensions with China prompted by the tariffs. Now, this is David Lassoff, who runs this company called Incredible Gifts, right? So he sells these hats, Make America Great Again, buys them from China, and he told ABC News that prices of the hat could double from between $9 and $12 to at least $20 if he is forced to abandon his Chinese manufacturers and make the hats in the United States. Oh my God. I actually have to have these hats made in America to avoid the tariffs? Your hat is Make America Great Again. Isn't it ironic that you're using a Chinese manufacturer to make a hat that says Make America Great Again? Very ironic, right? Now, even more so, when you look at how many they sell. The hat Lassoff said is his website's best-selling item, and he claims to have sold hundreds of thousands of the hat. Wow. Now, in a statement, Lassoff also said, there might be a limited quantity of hats in the future. We're trying to make sure we have enough hats in stock now, so if things change, we're prepared. We are prepared. So get your hats now for $9 to $12 because they might go up in the future. That's actually a brilliant marketing strategy because it sort of creates scarcity. They're going to go. They're going to go. So you might as well get your Make America Great Again hat now from China because the other ones that the Trump campaign sells, which, again, are actually made in America, so they claim, they cost more. Well, why do you think that Trump supporters, that MAGA guys, buy the cheaper hats? It's because they're cheaper. And they're cheaper because they're made in China. And, of course, they realize that all you have to do is look inside the brim and realize, that, oh, yeah, this was made in China. But look, what official Trump apparel is not made in China? Again, you look at Ivanka Trump, you look at stuff that Donald Trump has, historically sold, the Trump organization. I think about 99% of their stuff comes from other countries, manufactured in other countries. So it is kind of hilarious that Trump ran on hire American, buy American. And these MAGA guys are saying the same thing. They're cheering the same thing while they're wearing their Chinese hat. Kind of funny. See, here's the thing. The reason that I can say that, and I can point out that these people are hypocrites, is the fact that Lassoff himself is saying, we sold hundreds of thousands of hats. Well, who's buying them? Somebody's buying them. It's the MAGA guys. You're buying them. And they despise China. And it's hilarious that they despise China, yet they buy cheap fucking hats from China. And even more hilarious, now you have Trump's tariffs possibly making those hats more expensive. That is irony upon sweet, sweet irony. Nonetheless, though, there's an overall dark point to this, which is trade wars. That's what's doing this. Now, Donald Trump started the trade war. And he's like, well, what are you talking about? Trade wars are easy to win and they are good. No, they're not easy to win. No, they're not good. Trump supporters all over the country are being crushed. Soybean farmers. There are people working at Harley Davidson in Wisconsin that are losing their job. That whole plant is going to Thailand. They're going elsewhere. Why? It's because of the tariffs. We already have tariffs on steel and aluminum that are destroying American jobs. And now you have other tariffs that are also going to go into effect. Tariffs against or tariffs coming from the EU, tariffs coming from Canada, that are having a huge impact on the American economy. In fact, there are some people talking about how this could end up leading into a recession. Oh, but trade wars are so easy. They're so good and easy to win. No, they're not. You're an idiot. And anybody who, of course, ironically or doesn't ironically wear a Chinese-made "Make America hat," "Make America Great Again" hat is also kind of an idiot. Look, if you think we're still winning, I've got bad news for you. You are delusional, because this does not look like winning. Okay. One more here. Now, earlier this week, the Democratic Party in California, let me start that again. Now, earlier this week, the California Democratic Party had offered a stunning rebuke to the state's senior U.S. Senator, Dianne Feinstein. Now, Feinstein, of course, is a dinosaur. She's been there about 1 million years in office, and she's actually fairly conservative. And it turns out that delegates in California are not happy with her leadership. And in doing so, or in showing so, they have endorsed her primary challenger, Kevin DeLeon. Now, Kevin DeLeon is, of course, the former state Senate leader from L.A. Now, Common Dreams reports that in a vote by the party's 330-member executive body in Oakland on Saturday, DeLeon received a full 65% of the votes. 65%. Now, you might think, okay, look, Feinstein, she probably got a, what, 40, 35%? I mean, yeah, that's a pretty big margin. But Feinstein may be holding in there. No, you would be wrong. Here's how much Feinstein had received. She received 7%. Now, Feinstein also, she knew she was going to get a blowout. So before that, she had argued with the board to not issue an official party endorsement. So this is for the California Democratic Party, and they have refused to endorse Senator Feinstein. That is amazing. Now, DeLeon. Look, I got issues with DeLeon. I don't think he's as progressive as I'd like him to be. But, to be fair, DeLeon is miles apart from Feinstein. Feinstein is essentially a conservative. She is a center-right politician. And look, progressives in California are actually really, really tired of being represented by somebody who does not represent them. In fact, the LA Times noted that this endorsement of DeLeon was an embarrassment for Feinstein. And of course, it indicates that Democratic Party activists in California have soured on her reputation for what they call pragmatism and deference to bipartisanship, as Trump and a Republican-led Congress are attacking Democratic priorities in immigration, healthcare, and environmental protections. Yet now would not be the time for pragmatism. Now is not the time for deference to bipartisanship. When is the last time you saw a Republican saying, we need to be bipartisan, here's a bill that gives you half of what you want? No. When a Republican normally talks about bipartisanship, they talk about, no, you come to our side. We have this policy position that is monstrous, that is usually horrendous in most cases, and we want you to come over and be bipartisan, meaning you can sign our monstrous bill. Come over to our side. That's what that's about. Well, no, we're tired of the deference. Hey, look, Feinstein, you're supposed to be a member of the so-called resistance. Well, you don't seem to be resisting Trump all that much when you make calls for oh no, let's give him a fair hearing. No. Let's not. Okay? Let's not do that. Because they certainly do not do so with us. Now, David Dayen, writing for The Intercept, of course, somebody who lives in California, was following the process very, very closely, said that, quote, the executive board, this is of the California Democratic Party, has grown more and more progressive for a decade, since a new generation of activists secured spots in the party hierarchy. DeLeon proved to have better relationships with party delegates than a senator who spends most of her time in Washington and little connecting with Democratic activists back home. She spent almost no time with Democratic Party activists, and in fact, she spent a lot of her time not just in Washington, but going to fundraisers. See, that's the number one thing Feinstein would do, is that, and that's of course the number one reason why she's in the party, and that's the argument that they're making. Well, Feinstein raises money. She raises a lot of money for the party, and so look, we should keep her in her position. Why? Well, I mean, it's the money, of course, but we don't care about your money. We don't care about the corporate money. We want to get that money out of politics. In fact, we believe that that corporate money actually hurts us instead of helps us because it makes our politicians beholden to corporate interests. We're not interested with that. We're not interested in that at all. We want to get rid of that corrupting influence from inside the party. And in order to do that, you got to get rid of the people who've spread that corrupting influence. And that, of course, is Feinstein. And she's just one of the examples of politicians that continue to take money from big corporations and then, of course, disperse that to other politicians. I think this is a great day for California. I think this was a great decision. These delegates worked very, very hard. And I think this looks great for the future of not only the California Democratic Party, but the Democratic Party as a whole. Already Ocasio-Cortez had deposed Joe Crowley. Again, same argument. He raised money for the party, and that's why he should stay. Nope, he got eliminated because the voters spoke up. And they said, we don't want somebody who's addicted to corporate money. We want actually somebody who represents us. And so DeLeon might not be perfect, but at least I think he is more progressive and he is more open to being able to actually represent people in California. So at the end of the day, this is a huge embarrassment to Feinstein and a huge boon for DeLeon. And we're going to have to see where this leads from here. Okay. That's it. That's all we got. So, let me see. Let me just wrap up the show here. I'm going to thank everybody, of course, for watching. If you haven't already, please give us a like if you enjoyed the stream. I have one more super chat that I want to read here. Mark says, we need the Infinity Gauntlet to end this nightmare. Yeah, it could actually do that, couldn't it? I mean, you could probably do anything with the Infinity Gauntlet. It's just that Thanos had to be a dick and get rid of half the population. Let me try. Let me try. No, didn't work. God damn it. I need the gauntlet. Yeah. Would you trust me with the gauntlet? That's a good question. So, but anyway, here we go. Thank you guys for watching. Thank you for the super chats. Thank you for the likes and shares. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel as well, so you can end up getting more content when we release it. So that's it. All right, everybody. Thank you. Love you guys. And remember, change begins with you. Good night, 2AT Nation. See you guys tomorrow.